Hello and welcome to Fine is a Four-Letter Word. My guest today is Marissa Levin. Marissa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure to be with you. This should be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you about your journey from Fine. Let's start with the first question that I always start with, and that is, what were the values and beliefs that you were raised with that contributed to you becoming who you became as a young adult?
I would say that the core values that really defined who I became as a young adult, not necessarily who I am today, but as a young adult, Judaism was the central premise of my life. That was it. Like I would say that the values of being Jewish and the importance of being Jewish were definitely the center of our world.
And within that, were there other things like I know in my family, like education was a part.
Yeah, education absolutely. Like that was just a given. Like there was no option that we were not going to college. I
Uh-huh.
mean, we were absolutely going to college. So yeah, education, family, friends. I mean, growing up prior to my parents' divorce, our house was always filled with lots of people. So community. So yeah, I guess yeah, it would definitely be Judaism and education, also service to others.
Mm.
My father worked for NASA before retiring for decades and was definitely committed to the mission there, and my mom did a lot of community service as well. So I would definitely say that service to others, education, and then just the basic foundation of Judaism really kind of shaped me growing up.
Uh-huh. Okay. And then how did that play out in decisions that you made in the early part of your life throughout?
So I suppose another value was that basically you did what you were told, right? You didn't question what you were told, and being raised in a certain way, we were absolutely instructed and just raised with the premise that you marry quote unquote your own kind. That's the way my mom raised me, my parents raised me, and there's no fault
Mm-hmm.
there because um, where they came from. They were from New York, and the generation in which they grew up was the generation that she was 17, right in the middle of World War II, right? So the whole shadow of the
Mm-hmm.
Holocaust absolutely framed my parents' reality, right? Like the way they experienced life, the way they saw themselves, growing up with a lot of anti Semitism, a lot of neo Nazi behavior in the streets of New York growing up. And so that shaped who they were. And then they took that experience and they overlaid it onto their
Mm-hmm.
children, right? Like that's how all parents parent, right? Like they take their own experiences, conscious or unconscious, and they put it on top of their children, and with the best intentions in mind. And that's exactly how I was raised. I was raised that marrying Jewish was 100% the single most important priority. That was the main thing that I remember growing
Yeah.
up.
Okay. And then I'm curious, did you, because I know you have two boys, how did you change that dynamic with them? Or did you?
You know what? I took that dynamic very unconsciously and continued it.
Uh-huh.
And so, without really giving a lot of thought to until really a decade ago, to really starting to think about what is it that I learned and what is it that I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what was kind of put on top of me, right? And what did I assimilate versus really kind of like what's in my heart and what's in my spirit.
Yeah. Yeah. What's
And
true to
so,
me?
yeah, and so going from unconscious belief to conscious belief, right? So when we were raising our children, I absolutely raised them with the same values and the same principles that I was raised with, that my parents were raised with, that their parents were raised with, right? Like generation to
Yeah.
generation, door to door in Judaism. And there's a lot about Judaism that I absolutely love in terms of customs and traditions, and I'm very respectful and mindful of the history. But as you know, more than a decade ago, as I started to kind of really examine what is it that I believe versus what did I learn, that was really where there were some contradictions. And so I really had to go on a lot of soul searching about that. So I did raise my children under the same premise. But you know, Lori, as you know, through this, I mean, the whole purpose of your podcast is about evolution and growth and change
Right.
and coming face to face with those unconscious beliefs that keep you in fine, right? And then doing that close examination of what moves you from the unconscious beliefs to the conscious beliefs. And so that's the work that I've been doing for over a decade as part of my 30-year spiritual path. So
Did that path mirror your journey in your business? Because I know you've been through a lot of business transformation. So two questions. One, what was the trigger? I don't know if triggering event is the right word. What was the like the one that was there a specific event that you reached a point in your life where you went, yeah, I need to really examine these values that I've accepted over these years and see if they really fit for me. And that's where you started your spiritual journey. Was there a specific incident?
well, my spiritual journey started long before that, but for me, along my spiritual journey was really kind of getting a feel for where does Judaism play a role in my spiritual journey. My spiritual journey has been, I mean, I've always been, as you know me, I've I don't remember not being on a spiritual path. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
born empathic. I was born kind of connected to the metaphysical world.
Yeah.
I mean, that isn't something that I just kind of stumbled upon or that I embarked upon. It's kind of like the essence of who I am. But the really deep spiritual path, in terms of like what I believe, I would say that it was over 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that I started really exploring the teachings of different sects and paths of
Mm-hmm.
Buddhism, right? Whether it was Tibetan Buddhism or Zen Buddhism. Now I'm really fascinated with Nichiren Buddhism, which is out of Japan. And so, but the premise of Buddhism, in terms of living from a place of compassion and a lot of the principles that I just have kind of learned and embodied along the last 25 years, they were very much a part of my spiritual journey. And then I was kind of overlaying Judaism on top of
Mm-hmm.
that. And the work that I've been doing is really understanding like how it all comes together and being okay with, quite frankly, not agreeing with a lot of what Judaism teaches.
Yeah, you and I have been on similar paths, even from way before we even knew each other, that questioning, which I am going to guess was not always easily accepted by your parents, that you were questioning, because in
Sure.
my journey it wasn't. um, but yeah, questioning what is the right thing for me. And that's again another thing we talk about on the show a lot is getting to that place where you can hear that inner voice of this is my truth, regardless of what all the outside voices are telling you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I mean, my mom has always been a free spirit, even though like she had such firm beliefs because of how she was raised and the things that she experienced, right? The things that she personally experienced, the degrees and the levels of anti-Semitism, again, because she grew up in the city during the Holocaust,
Mm-hmm.
right? So um, the what was happening, in Europe, the permeations were occurring in the United States, and anti-Semitism, was at an all-time high at that point, and so she personally experienced a lot of threat, a lot of physical threat,
Wow.
and so because of that, that colored her lens of the world, and so when it was time for her to raise a family, for her it was all about being immersed in a Jewish culture and community and environment, and so that was what was important for her as a parent. My father actually also raised in a very observant home, right? But because of experiences that he went through when he was growing up, he's actually atheist. So, I mean, he's Jewish, but I mean, because of his own experiences, he would consider himself an
That's so
atheist.
interesting.
So, yeah. So, where I am, um, I feel fully connected to everyone in the everything and everyone in the universe,
Yeah.
right? Like I feel that we're all connected. I feel that energetic link really to everyone. I don't feel separation. And I don't feel divisiveness. I feel unity. And so, the time came for me when I was raising my children and I was like, being the puppet and being like that unconscious mouthpiece of, Judaism, Judaism, Judaism. Yeah, this is what's important to our family, generation to generation, follow the traditions. That's what matters most. And then, when my children started to develop their own beliefs and started, dating girls of, all different backgrounds, I really had a reckoning of like, well, what is it that I really believe,
Mm.
right? I mean, am I going to just parrot and repeat, stick to your own kind, which is what I was raised, when really in my heart, I don't really believe that because I believe that we're all connected,
Hmm.
right? So as a parent, it's been quite an interesting journey.
I bet. I bet. So since the show is called Fine is a four-letter word, tell us about a time when you were in that place where you were saying everything was fine, but it really wasn't fine.
There are so many. I mean, I could fill up 8 hours of time for that where I have done that type of introspection. But, when we talk about business, as you know, I'm a 30-year entrepreneur, right? I've had four businesses. I grew my first business. I started that business 30 years ago when I was working for a consulting firm. And this is going back when I was just in my early 20s, and he capped my worth at $34,000 after I had gone into him and made a business case about how much money I was making his company and the value that I was worth in the marketplace based on my experience, my education, how much money I was bringing in by doing sales on top of all the work I was
Hmm.
doing. And he looked at me and he said, "You won't ever be worth more than $34,000 to my firm." So that was not fine,
Right.
right?
Definitely not fine.
And so I heard my mom's voice in my head who said, "You never let anyone determine your value or your worth." And I decided to start my own company. That was really a huge lesson for me. And, my undergraduate degree was in English with a concentration in Shakespeare. I didn't have a business degree or a business background, but I knew what I didn't want, and that was to work for someone who didn't value me. And so I've always believed that the best way to predict the future is to create it, that we have full agency and empowerment over creating the outcomes that we want. I'm a manifester. And so even back then, when I was in my early 20s, after short stints in careers of journalism and then consulting, I knew that if I was going to create the life I wanted to create, I had to step into something that was unknown and into a blank slate. And so that's why I started my first company. And I grew that for 17 years, and the journey of that was full of mistakes and pain and difficulty, but also lots of beauty,
Hmm.
right? And lots of growth. And my whole reason for transitioning out of that company, I mean, there were many reasons, but one of the main reasons was because our client at the time, the government, we were a government contractor, they went to what is known as the lowest price technically acceptable model, the LPTA mandate. And that was under the Obama administration. And literally overnight, my rates had to be cut in
Oh,
half.
wow.
And so when you're running a company and you're billing for time, uh, and you are in the middle of multi-million dollar programs, and you've got people that you pay really well, right? Because you value relationships over everything else, and then you're told that basically you have to cut all of your rates in half. That was a psychological bloodbath for me, and things all of a sudden were not fine,
Right.
right? And so I remember being in that crossroads, that inflection period of saying, who am I and what do I stand for? And I could not get behind the value system of my largest client, which was the federal government. And so it was at that time that I'm like, I think my time is done here. And that was the company that I started,
Mm-hmm.
that I built with my blood, sweat, and tears, that I poured my whole heart and soul into. And so when you're standing and you're looking at something that you built and you don't see a place for yourself anymore in there, you're not fine, are
You are
you?
not fine.
So,
What were the tools that you
yeah.
used to help you manage through that? I mean, obviously, we've talked about your spiritual journey. Were there other things
Mm-hmm.
that you employed at that time? And did you walk away from the company?
Sure,
Did you shut it down? What?
I did. I walked away. So I walked away 14 years ago. It's still going.
Okay.
I mean, it's not. It's a shell of what it was. It's nowhere in any reflection of who I am, or
Mm-hmm.
what my values are, or anything.
That's a really good
Um,
point because when I shut down the baking company, it was right away. The first thought was like, I failed. Like, this is a reflection on me and who I am. And I had to
right.
work through it's just something that happened. It happened
Yeah.
and we're moving on. It's not a reflection of my value or my worth. And did you go through that a little bit? Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I remember when all of that happened, and I want to just asterisk that, with the fact that all of our memories um, are
Yeah,
inaccurate.
I know. It's so
Like,
interesting when you start reading
you
the
know what I
research
mean?
about the memory and how the brain retains memories and how they're not accurate. You're like, wait a minute, how is that possible? But yeah, it's
Yeah, like
fascinating.
even as I share all these stories with you, Lori, there is a caveat that what I'm telling you may not be 100% accurate, because I'm only recalling what happened 15 years
Right.
ago. And there's so many things that color that,
Exactly.
right? So, I mean, I think that there's accuracy in terms of the chronology of the events, but I know that the way I'm going to share with you exactly what happened probably is not exactly what happened, because none of us remember everything
And
precisely.
there are
It
still
just,
lessons in the stories we do tell.
right, exactly. So, I can, but what we do remember are
Mm-hmm.
feelings, right? Like, we may not remember events or thoughts exactly, but we remember feelings. And so I do remember, I remember when one of my advisors, when I was talking with him about leaving my business, and I can remember being with him in the conference room and him saying to me, "You got to just walk away. You got to leave your salary. You got to turn around and walk away and never look back and start
Mm.
over." And I remember that. And, um, and I remember how hard it was, because as a business owner, especially for almost 2 decades, my whole
Yes.
identity was wrapped into that business. Not only my internal identity, but my identity, in the region,
Yes.
right? And
Your
like, I
reputation.
was known as I was known as the founder and CEO of that company, and everyone attached that company to who I was, and then all of a sudden I'm no longer that
Mm-hmm.
person. So there's that coming to Jesus that you have internally, of like, well, who am I really?
Right.
And to answer your question about what are the tools and strategies I use to move me through these transitions, um, definitely my spiritual path. I mean, I've, like you, I've been, a devoted meditator, and for decades, right? I mean, I like, my meditation room in my old house was my sanctuary. It's where I went to escape and to ground and to dissolve the day, and, do whatever I needed to do. So definitely my spiritual work and my spiritual path was tremendous, which is why Buddhism was such a saving grace for me, because I clung to everything that I learned from, whether it was Thich Nhat Hanh or Pema Chodron or Dalai Lama or Jack Kornfield, or whoever any of the the so many of the teachers were, Sharon
Mm-hmm.
Salzberg. I clung to everything that I learned in all of my journals and all of the studies that I did. I really did. I also, and I am proud to share this because I want to be a voice for mental health. I have been in and out of therapy, for the last 25 years, right? Like, I mean, I've written about this. My therapist is a lifeline. And I still go on and
Mm-hmm.
off. I'm not at the place right now where I go every week or anything like that, but like, that to me is one of my most pivotal tools and resources, because it's a place I can go that has information and insight on my patterns,
Right.
and knows my history, and knows my shadow side, right? And knows how I process, and can help me see things in both, a what I call a compassionately critical way, right? Like, I need to be looking at myself critically with compassion in order to be able to move past my blocks and accept all that I am and become a better person. And so I huge proponent of therapy to move us through our difficulties. I don't think I'll never. I will always be in therapy. I will always have a relationship with my therapist because she provides such valuable insight for me, so that I can move past my blocks and show up the best I can show up for everyone in my life.
Absolutely.
So, therapy, my spiritual path, my girlfriends, tremendous, right? My
Mm-hmm.
lifelines. And then will always be devoted to my health, my physical health, right? I've been weight training and taking care of my body since I was 15. And so working out for me is what I call both for sanity and vanity.
Right.
And I am not embarrassed about that at
Yeah, me
all,
either. Me
right? It
either. In
keeps
fact, you
me.
mentioned your sanctuary. The gym is my sanctuary. Yeah.
There you go. So that's my other sanctuary. So, it keeps me sane. And quite frankly, I'm superficial too. And I want to continue looking good. And there's no shame in
I
that
hear
either.
you.
So, sanity and vanity. So, yeah, I really focus on my holistic health of my mind, my body, my heart, and my spirit. And I think, this journey, if there's anything that any of your listeners get from this episode, the whole purpose of everything in our life is to learn and to grow.
Right.
And all of the experiences in our life, they're simply like acts in the play of our life, right? Like, they're the vehicles, they're the gateways for our learning and our growth and evolution. And we have to not take everything so seriously,
That's
right?
such a
And
good way to
every
look at
relate
it.
yeah, every relationship we have in our life, it's how do we know ourselves better?
Hmm.
It's not about looking at someone else and criticizing them, or, thinking they don't fit a certain mold or a certain idea, or why are they showing up a certain way. Every relationship in our life is to teach us about ourselves. What are our unconscious beliefs or prejudices or judgments? How can we move that to being conscious,
Yeah.
right? How are other people, if they are struggling with things and therefore they show up in a certain way in our life, right? How are we processing how they're showing up, and also standing in our own truth and our own value system, so we can be compassionate and understanding about somebody, and also know what works for us, right? So that's the purpose of life, and that's the purpose of every relationship.
Yeah, it's really important to look at things that are happening in your life as, why is this happening for me? Or recognizing that
Sure.
it's happening for you as opposed to
Always.
you in the victim
Hmm.
mode, which, a lot of people tend to go to that framework. But
Yeah.
yeah, to look at why, how is, and how, maybe it's a better, not why, how is this happening for me?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So, I like kind of go through life. Well, that one of my favorite books is Don Miguel Ruiz, The Four Agreements, right? So, be impeccable with your word, don't make assumptions, don't take anything personally, and then always do your best. And one of the things that he talks about in that book is how important it is to be both a witness and a participant to your own
Mm.
life. And I mean, this is work that we both have been doing for decades. So for me to be able to look at my life as a witness and say, how am I showing up? What am I learning from this experience? Where am I being judgmental, because of my own self limiting beliefs, and because of, um, external conditions that were put
Mm-hmm.
upon me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, this is good and this is bad. This is right and this is wrong. Those are all opinions, and and how much do I allow that to really influence my opinion of others or situations. And so I'm just very cognizant of like every relationship, of how people show up in my life now, of like always coming at it from a place of compassion,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And then do you also
Without
question
self-sacrifice.
what is the lesson here, and why is this person showing up in this way? And
Yeah,
right, so because
always.
where is the lesson here? And then going back to what you were saying a little bit earlier about being in therapy and having, um, the so often, I really dislike the term when, especially applied to business people, as in a self-made millionaire or a self-made
Mm-hmm.
person, because no one is self-made. We all rely on other people to help us
We do.
and build who we are. So that term has always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But the point of there's no shame in asking for help and getting help and having a therapist and having a coach, which I want to talk a minute about your new business as well, because, and this is what you and I are doing now in terms of helping people. Like you mentioned, you have your friends, and that's a great resource. We definitely need to have friends, and yet there are a lot of situations that friends cannot help us with, in part
Mm-hmm.
because they are personally invested in
True.
when they see you change, that might be a reflection on them, and it might be uncomfortable. So they don't necessarily always offer a completely unbiased objection,
Mm-hmm.
um, coming from an objective place.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah, yeah. And I think, life is so fluid, right? So there are people that will ebb, that will come in and out of your
Mm-hmm.
life, right? Like relationships will ebb and flow, just like seasons, right? They're constantly changing, and so um, when I do, like you just mentioned, I am just aware that when someone comes into my life, I really have worked hard to detach from the
Mm-hmm.
outcome of anything,
Yeah.
like literally to release expectation of anything, like any relationship, right? Anyone that comes in my life, any situation, like I can be emotionally invested in a situation and an experience, but I'm really mindful now to not jump ahead and to be in gratitude for what is right in front of
Mm-hmm.
me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not create a scenario down the road that may result in pain or disappointment or suffering, only because I've created an expectation based on a story that I've told myself.
Yeah, and that's so
So I just
easy to say, and
of course it
more
is.
difficult to actually do. And again, but it comes back to practice. The more you practice.
Right, it's the practice, right, of really detaching from outcomes and just enjoying the experience for what it is right now. And if it was nothing else ever again, can you just enjoy what you've
Yes,
experienced, right?
yes.
So, not falling in love with the potentiality,
Mm-hmm.
not falling in love with the outcome that you're envisioning in your life, but just being where you are today with no judgments, no expectations attached to it. And it is very difficult, and especially I'm a visionary and I'm a planner and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's balancing both of that, but you find a lot more peace internally when you can be right where you are right now, right? Be here now, like Ram Dass says, and let go of fear of something manifesting or not manifesting the way that you want it to, and just be present.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of the present, I know you have a brand new website out, and so I wanted to just touch on that
New company,
for a moment.
new company. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what's it?
So I'm launching Marissa International, and it's audacious, um, and I've it's bold and it's audacious. It's a global firm, and I've created a model around joy. I've identified 6 elements of joy. You can go to marissainternational.com. Six elements of joy are the path, purpose, power, potential, people, and play. And my book, The Little Book of Big Joy, will be coming out in 2023. And then I've created several products and services under my new entity, Marissa International. Our flagship program is the Power Paradigm, and it stands for Purpose, Ownership, Worth, Efficacy, and Resilience. It is a full model on how to help people either reclaim or step into their power, really fully stepping into their internal power. I've got a program called the Self-Worth Rebirth Program to help people really reclaim their self-love, their self-compassion, right? Their self-worth, moving from self-loathing and self-sacrifice into self-love. Mm-hmm. And I've got a whole host of other products and services, and obviously still doing the leadership and entrepreneurial coaching, which has been a foundation of what I've done for decades.
Yeah.
So, but I'm really excited because I think through the work with Marissa International and the academy that we're launching and all the other programs that we're going to be launching, my lifetime legacy mission through this company is to empower 1 billion people to live their most joyful lives. And I really feel that if people start to become conscious of these 6 elements, right? Path, purpose, power, potential, people, and play, and really understand what those are and how to be more conscious for them, this is really how you capture your most joyful life. We're not here to suffer.
I agree completely.
We are not here to suffer. All suffering, honestly, is man-made, and it's up here, right? It's up in our minds with our thoughts, and our intellect can work against us quite often. So,
right, which is why it's so important to tap into the heart.
Right. So the work that I'm doing through Marissa International is really about helping 1 billion people, access their most joyful path.
Awesome. Well, we will put links to that in the show notes. And before we go, though, I got to ask you, what is the question? What is the song that you listen to when you need an extra boost of energy, that like your hype song that gets you up and dancing?
So I have actually a playlist on Spotify called Marissa's Best Life Playlist. And so I do listen to that like pretty much every morning in the shower, and I'm constantly singing and dancing. I would say that it's either Unwritten by Natasha Bedingfield, right? Or I love This Is Me from the
the movie.
The movie with about Barnum Bailey.
Yeah,
right?
the Greatest Show. Is that what it's called?
The Greatest Show. Yeah, I love that.
That's such a good one.
And I would say that my life theme song, though, my anthem, is "Life Is What You Make It." So.
We will put links to those songs in the show notes as well. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me today on Fine is a 4-letter word, Marissa.
Really, really fun to talk with you, Lori, and thank you for creating this platform for people to share their stories.